Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast. My name is Dan Murphy, and with me always is Derek Brissett and Stu Hardy. Gentlemen, the journey for the men's sevens team at the Olympics is over. They officially have finished 8th overall. You know, it's interesting to say in a sport that a team that had only one win managed to have a pretty successful Olympics, you know, considering what everyone thought was going to happen. But before we get into the rugby and we talk about what we thought about that, has there been any of the Olympic other sports that have kind of caught your eye this year?
So
go ahead, Stu. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks, Derek. So during a downtime at my job, I was able to catch the women's triathlon. And it's okay. Something along with the sevens is the fact that there's no fans just makes it the weirdest Olympics. But it was, I was only able to catch the running portion of it, and even then, just only half of it. But the Bermuda athlete, I am Flora, I can't remember her last name. Not only is that her first medal at the Olympics, it's Bermuda's first gold medal as well.
Oh, cool.
And it wasn't even close. She was like 90 seconds down the road when she crossed the finish line. No one came near her. The American athlete that was leading apparently at the start of the run finished third, and the British athlete finished second. So, you know, it's a mixed bag, but I mean, congratulations to Bermuda for getting their first ever gold medal. And I think it's obviously difficult trying to get any of like the big events because they're all at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning.
Sure,
although Derek's the bags under Derek's eyes will say it's not Derek. Impossible.
Great job, no, my sleep schedule is messed up right now. But yeah, so I went, I think, yeah, it's just because I've been doing my best to watch that, because there's that one time slot that's really nice. That first session of the day is like really nice. That's like 8 o'clock to like 10:30. I guess the last game ends at 11 realistically. So like 8 o'clock to 11, I'm like, that's like a prime time. That's a good slot. It's the one that like, so I've been watching all of that, and then I'll go to bed and then wake up for like the afternoon one, or the early morning one, afternoon in Japan, I guess. And that's like, so I'm getting like not a whole lot of sleep, but I figured out it's like I've been going to sleep. I've been waking up for the games that I want to watch. So I woke up for the Canada games, but then I'll go back to sleep for the games that I don't care about. And then wake back up again. Like for like today, I watched all of the afternoon session. I went to bed, woke up for the Canada game, went back to sleep during the USA South Africa game, woke back up for like the bronze medal, gold medal game, which were totally worth it. Those games were awesome. And then I went back to sleep for an hour before getting up to go to work. So sleep, it's funny, like looking at like my watch with the got like a Garmin fitness tracker and seeing like the sleep schedules, like be like, you slept for like 4 hours, and like, or it says like I slept for 6 hours, but it's like 2 hours I'm awake for it. So it's not really like, it's very bizarre kind of like looking at it. So, I mean, there's been, Dan, you asked how much of the rest of if I've been enjoying the rest of the Olympics. And normally I'm a huge Olympic nut. Like I watch everything when it comes to the Olympics. So, but like I kind of like with the rugby tournament starting and the time slot, I'm like my whole time so far has been devoted to rugby. So I'm sure I'll check out some cool stuff next week. But it's cool seeing like Penny Alexiak get another medal, just add to, her reign of terror. And she's now most decorated Canadian Summer Olympian of all time already. She's just 21 years old. So she'll only be 24 at the next Olympics if she continues on this.
She could hypothetically like compete at another two more Olympics.
Yeah, exactly. Or if she wants, And then her brother got drafted by the Seattle Kraken, so that's a fun week for that family.
Nice little deal, I've been watching a lot of the surfing. I think it's been really fun.
Oh yeah, was that cool? Like I didn't get a chance
so the first round of it was really weird because it was like super calm, and like there's just like these little waves, but the surface was still able to do a lot of really cool tricks with it. And
Mm.
then like I tuned in for like the semifinals, and like the waves were huge. And I'm like,
Mm.
can you imagine being a rugby player and then like you have one day where your pitch is just like just a nice even pitch, and the next day there's just like holes everywhere, like that, like
I'm
surfing
sure
is
it's
one.
happened to somebody somewhere. Yeah.
I'm sure, but like for professionals, like to have a like terrain that you have to rely on for sport be so like
It's
just
just a unique.
messed up.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty unique element to
Yeah,
it.
so that was pretty cool. Skateboarding has been fun to watch.
I know. Yeah.
Oh,
Apparently, if you're 15, you're too old to
to
compete in
metal.
skateboarding.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm
So
not sure.
that
I
was
think
cool.
yeah, that kind of hurt me realizing it's like, oh my god, I'm twice as old as some Olympic gold
Yeah.
medalist right now. What have I done with my life?
Speaking of the
Um,
triathlons too, I tuned in to like just kind of triathlon, like I'll watch that, and it was like
you
as
know what it
people were
was?
running
The
in.
end of the triathlon was what CBC was using to segue into the Canada Japan game.
Oh,
That's
okay.
that's why I saw
Okay.
the end of the triathlon.
Yeah, I totally saw a girl cross the line and then spew everywhere. It was so gross.
Dude, man, that's a
Yeah, and
hard event.
I
Any of
know,
those
I
like
know.
endurance,
She
any
had
of
to
those
get
endurance things, it's
she had to be like
it's
put in a
crazy.
wheelchair and wheeled off. It was crazy.
yeah.
All right, guys, let's talk.
I was just going to say, I just want to confirm that the athlete's name is Flora Duffy. She's former world champion.
Well, she's
So
current
obviously,
world champion now, so
current Olympic champion. There's a
true.
difference.
There's a difference.
But yeah, Bermuda's first gold medal ever.
So I think the Philippines got their first gold medal.
Yes, they did as well.
then-
That was cool.
Yeah, so that was
It's been
cool. That was
pretty
like
cool Olympics so far.
weightlifting of some. I can't remember.
I think it's
level or weight class
weightlifting
or whatever.
55 kilo, under 55 kilos, I believe.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that was.
But-
Cool. It's cool seeing. And then there was that one swimmer from like Tanzania or something.
Yeah, I get
too,
the
and
golden
was like,
swimming.
yeah,
That was
it's
really
cool seeing. It's cool seeing the countries that don't usually get medals.
Yeah.
And stuff. It's always, it's always an exciting moment. It's what makes the Olympics fun to
Yeah.
watch, though.
Okay, so Canada's tournament. So in the group stage, they had a blowout against Great Britain. They had a close game against Fiji, but ended up kind of losing in the end of it. And they beat Japan pretty easily. It seemed in the group stage, their trajectory kind of just went up, 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 up. And then thanks to Ireland beating Kenya by like just like the right way, they had to beat them the right way. Canada made it to the quarterfinals, and Derek and I talked about this last week about what, like, that being that one of those third place teams was probably where Canada was going to aim for. They got it, and the reward was, all right, you're going to play against the All Blacks.
as it always is, right? It's always, you get into the that's the thing though, right? You get into the quarterfinals, you squeak in as the lowest seed. That means you get number one.
Get the number one, right? So they lost to the All Blacks, and then they played a damn close game against the United States. Just losing at the buzzer. Carlin Isles just doing Carlin Isles stuff. And then they finished their tournament off by losing to Australia. I mean, the first half seemed close. The second half, Australia kind of just pulled away from them. And I think, we're going to talk about what maybe some of the things that Canada didn't have. But going into the medal stages, Fiji went back to back, beating the New Zealand in the gold medal game, and it was a fun gold medal game to watch for sure. And the team that I loved watching this tournament, Argentina, won bronze against Great Britain, and that was a really interesting match as well. I want to get your guys' thoughts about first. I want to go into Canada's tournament and kind of what happened, and then I want to talk about the tournament as a whole, because there's a couple storylines that I think we need to quickly touch on before we move on. So guys, let's talk about what we saw on the pitch from Canada. In my mind, there were some guys that really stood out to me, and then they're kind of the regular old suspects, Nathan Hirayama, Connor Braid. I think Douglas had an amazing tournament. Justin Douglas. He was just kind of a playmaker in all facets. And then the duo of Andrew Coe and Theo Sauter to me had flashes of like, oh wow, they're playing really well, but then they would make a bonehead decision and make an offload to nobody, and then they would be turned over. So, I want to get your guys' quick thoughts about what kind of happened in this tournament that my hope was that they would have, finished in the middle of the pack and they end up being lower. What do you guys think?
I mean, for me, they finished about where I would expect them to finish. And by that, I mean, in my opinion, when you have an event like the Olympics, I understand why, like the 7 series plays all of the 7 and 8th place finals and stuff. But for a tournament like this, where you don't actually get points towards anything, honestly, the way I look at it is they lost in the quarterfinal. And I'm not like, if you finish between 8th and 5th, you're pretty much like, I think you're tied in my mind. You lost in the quarterfinal.
Yeah.
Right. Like you don't get, there's no reward for, like, South Africa doesn't get anything for finishing 5th. Right. They just, you got to play an extra 2 games for fun. Like, cool. So to me, they lost in the quarterfinal, which, it was about kind of, as me and Dan, like we talked about it last week. That's about where we were thinking they would, right? Because it was like, you would expect them to lose to Great Britain. Fiji's the best team in the world. Fiji proved that they are still the best team in the world during this tournament too, right? So no shame in losing to Fiji, no shame in losing to Great Britain. And what we said last week was exactly what they did. It's like they need to just, beat Japan and beat Japan badly. And it ended up that they had to beat Japan badly. And that game was great because you actually saw, a lot of the execution. Connor Braid had his hat trick. And, you saw like really like what they can do. And, ultimately that set up a super dramatic game between Ireland and Kenya, where I feel like you could see all the Canadian. I liked watching it on Twitter, like going through, like being on Twitter while it was happening, because you could see like all the Canadian fans being like, yeah, Ireland has to win. And then like Ireland's like, oh no, you're winning by too much. Let's go Kenya now. And like switching allegiances like halfway through the game, because it's like, oh no, you can't win by that much. Okay, sweet. And then when Vincent Onyala scored, I was like, oh, so yeah, like that was the most excited I've ever been for a Kenyan try in my life, and they didn't even win. So it was like, so I think that kind of it was this, and I mean, you saw like the pictures of like Nate Hirayama and Andrew Hammond kind of going around the Olympic Village because they were too nervous to watch until like the phones blew up and they realized that they got to the quarterfinal. And so I was like, you got to the quarterfinal, and then you have to play the All Blacks. Right. Mickelson, Curry, Ware, Collier, like, they had guys that were some of the best players in the tournament. Like Curry was, what did Curry have? Like 2 tries a game in this tournament? Like, seemed like every time the All Blacks scored, it was kind of him. I don't know what his actual number is, Dan. If you're look it up if you want to.
I'll look it up.
I feel like he had a lot of tries. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, it was like when it got to like Great Britain and Fiji, I think did a really good job of just breaking down Canada's defense, like being able to hold on to the ball long enough and then actually, being able to hold on to the ball and like find those gaps. Against Fiji, Canada actually did a good job of maintaining possession, but they struggled to get anywhere with the possession. Right. And then they ended up with a couple turnovers. And if you turn the ball over to Fiji, that's going to be a try. And I think too, like when it got to the game against New Zealand, New Zealand just dominated the breakdown. Every time there was a tackle, they counter-rucked and were able to earn a penalty or just outright steal the ball. And, to your point with Sauter and Coe, the one thing I thought was super interesting in the New Zealand game was Coe had a really awesome breakdown steal, like super early. And I was like, oh, maybe that'll be like the moment that kind of like, maybe that is like the heat check on how well the All Blacks are doing in the breakdown. But then it didn't end up being that way. And the All Blacks just kind of shook that off and continued to dominate that area of the game. So I think, ultimately, I'm not really surprised by like where they finished. I was psyched that they made the quarterfinal, So I think they were able to keep that medal hopes alive. It is like we talked about last week. It is one of those things where it's like we know Canada has beaten New Zealand in in a sevens match, and then we know Canada's also won events on the sevens series, right? So it wasn't always out of the realm of possibility, but there was a lot of I thought there was a lot of like good things that they did, but it's like you
Yeah.
kind of look through it and it's like the teams. It's weird. Like I guess that's the one good thing about the Olympics, right? It's the best of the best, right? So you look at the teams they lost to in this tournament. They lost to Great Britain, Fiji, New Zealand, USA, and Australia. Right, which I mean, those are all very good teams. Obviously, the United States is a huge rivalry, and they were, I mean, probably incredibly disappointed with how they got bounced
Yeah.
from quarterfinals.
Yeah, we'll talk about them later. So to answer your question, Scott Curry had 5 tries.
Who had the most tries in the tournament?
Marcos Moneta from
Moneta? Yeah, that
Argentina.
makes sense.
He had 6.
Moneta was unreal, man.
Yeah.
So that game, the South Africa Argentina game, where Argentina played almost the entire game with 6 guys, was amazing. That was that was easily the best game of the whole
I know.
tournament.
Focus though. We're talking about Canada. We're going to talk about
the tournament as a whole.
We're going to talk about them after. Yeah, it's and again, it's something that constantly plagues. And Stu, I want you to kind of give your opinion about this. And I saw this, and when I was kind of live tweeting about the game, the little detail mistakes, the not running into support, the offloads when there's nobody there, and rugby sevens is an incredibly quick game, incredibly quick. Like you don't have the time or the support you do in 15 to take your time and make a decision, because you're not going to have 3 guys are going to be with you to rock over that ball. Sometimes it's one guy and you have to make a decision. Is he going to get here in time, or do I have to whip this ball to somebody?
Mm-hmm.
I get that. But it just seems that the little mistakes that Canada made not only made them, they lost so many tries were scored, especially against Great Britain, their first game, which again, their first game, whatever, the rust has to come off.
Well, I think that's an important thing to mention too, Dan. If you're going to say like the rust is going to come off, is they like the lack of prep going into this game too, and even like Great Britain got to the Olympic Village like about a week before Canada did. Team Canada wasn't there for very long. I think my understanding is that they tried to just live on like Tokyo time while being at the training facility.
I think it was like Phil McKenzie was telling us that.
Yeah, and they were training in like hot boxes, or a hot box. That's definitely not the right word for that, but
hot tents or
exactly. Hot rooms, something.
Hot rooms.
But like they were training in those to kind of like, like work with like the climate and the heat and stuff. And I think even like some of those other countries too, like they've been able to play games a little bit more recently, like actual games and stuff, right? So, there was a little bit. So it's like the rust, it is it's part of, I think, what this whole past year has kind of been about. But I think, like I said, overall, I think they handled themselves pretty well. I think the one, like I said, it's like I think from my expectations going into the tournament, like we said last week, it was like beat Japan and get to the quarterfinal. And that's what they did. So I'm happy with it. I would have loved to see them beat the USA.
My struggle with that, Derek, is not so much from a player or coaching perspective, but from an organization. If we're worried about, and money is probably going to be the answer to why I'm frustrated, but like, why were they not pushing themselves to be in those warm-up tournaments? They did the Dubai Invitational, and then that was it. Why were they not part of those? I know, but like, I think we can't just
COVID protocols and stuff too.
Maybe, but
because the women's team had COVID when they came back from Dubai, right?
Yeah,
they all had to isolate and stuff there, right? So
but I think that's important to mention, is that at the end of the day, this is also a money thing.
For sure.
That if we didn't want to use that excuse of rust, then they probably should have been in Tokyo earlier. Like you said, Great Britain.
But you can't. I don't think you can be in Tokyo early. Like, I don't think you can be. I don't think you can be in the Olympic Village earlier.
Okay.
Because I think they have like their COVID
do whatever Great
protocols
Britain
are in place.
Then.
I think you're only allowed to be in the Olympic Village like.
Yeah.
Right
No, I
around
hear what you're saying,
event.
but Great Britain did it, so why couldn't Canada do it?
Well, they were in Tokyo. Were they in the village?
But at the same time zone. Like,
Yeah.
I don't care if they're in their rooms that they're going to be staying in. Just, obviously that was a
Yeah, but I think
little advantage. I mean, there's just little things that leading up to this were a little frustrating, and that's, I'm not saying I don't want that take that away from what the men accomplished in this tournament. Now, Stu, I want to get your.
I do think you answered your own question though before you
Yeah.
started your mini rant though. It's
Sometimes you
funny.
just need to talk out loud, and
Yeah,
sometimes
but you already know the answer, right? So
it's frustrating. Stu, looking at kind of the tournament as a whole, what do you think about kind of what Canada did? And I want to get both of your guys' thoughts about the future. So Stu, I want you to go first on this, because I have the ages of all the guys that went to Tokyo, and I'm not going to rhyme them all off, but the average age is about 28 years old. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 guys over the age of 30, and only 3 guys under the age of 25. So, I believe on one of the broadcasts, I think it was with the US, is that they said that Canada has one of the most experienced teams at the Olympics in terms of the seventh circuit.
Yeah.
So this is an older team.
Yes.
They are going. This is going to be a transition stage. We already know that Connor Braid and Harry Jones both have a real estate business together. That they are transitioning to their next step.
Yeah.
Nathan Hiriam is the oldest guy on the team. At 33 years old. He's I can't see him staying around for much longer.
Yeah.
And we know that there are some guys in this program, on this team, that the 15s coaches, Kingsley Jones and the guys with Team Canada are looking at them saying that we want them to also be part of our plans as well. And I know I had Mama Thiel on Twitter kind of remind me that the sevens isn't a stopping point. Some guys want to be part of the sevens program for all their careers. And I completely understand what she's saying there. But there's a point in time where most rugby sevens players have an expiration date. I think of someone like John Moonlight. Like, eventually he just couldn't keep up with the game, and he played a little 15s with the Arrows before he, went on with his firefighting career. And after the 2016 Rios, there wasn't an option like MLR kicking around. It's a personal thing. If I'm a 31, 33-year-old sevens player who just finished an Olympic cycle, and I've been offered by an MLR team a contract that's might pay out around the same that I was probably getting from Rugby Canada to play sevens, and instead of having to tour the world, I just have to tour North America or the States, depending on which team I play for. That's a pretty enticing life.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So I want to get your perspective first, Stu, about this. Where do you think that this tournament or this team is going to go? And we also, Derek and I also talked about this with ourselves and Brian Ray, that we also have a deficiency in certain positions that the sevens program has kind of taken some of our younger talent. We think about like Brock Webster and Mullins, who is also a typically a number 8. I want to get your guys' thoughts about where this team's going to next, now that the Olympics are now over for them.
Yeah. So you bring up a good point, as does Mama Thiel, in the sense of because of MLR and because of the sevens program in place, Canada doesn't need to do this thing of you can mix and match. You can be with the sevens program for a couple of years and then you can join an MLR team. It could be the case that by the time it comes to Paris 24, we have a sevens team that are playing exclusively sevens, and we have an MLR team that's playing exclusively 15s. Like, even in the Rugby Sevens senior men's list, they still have Quinn Nawadi listed. He's a 15s player now, guys. I don't know the last time he played sevens. If he comes back and plays sevens, then prove me wrong. But first of all, update the list. But to get more accurate with what can be done further down the line, so as posted by Rugby Canada, it is 365 days till the Commonwealth Games. In more or less my hometown, Birmingham, 2022. And obviously, I think what that tournament should be, because I think the qualification process is going to be far more streamlined. And also, only Commonwealth nations can go to it. So, of course, Canada will probably make an appearance. Is that this would be like the swan song for guys like anyone who wants to like retire in front of cheering crowds, in front of fans, regardless of which nationality they are. Because I think obviously if you'd say like, okay, the Olympics are going to be my final tournament, it's great to do that in front of supporters. When there's no one there, it's not the same. And just because this tournament's going to be in England, I think it's going to have a better reason to retire there than it would be to retire at the Olympics. Now, obviously, I don't know these guys' training regime or how much they've had to sacrifice to get to the Olympics. They may just say, "Sod it, it's not worth it. I'm calling time now." But I think that if they want to go one more year, again, it's the Commonwealth Games. It's not as serious as the Olympics, but to just play one more time in front of fans, in front of friends and family who should hopefully be able to come along and see these games. I mean, obviously, there'll be the World Sevens series that's happening in Vancouver and Edmonton. So maybe they say, oh, we'll retire there instead. Take your pick. But I think what can happen for the Seven series for 2021 will be a focus on things such as, okay, we're going to start bleeding the youngsters. I know I keep going on about like, oh, you got to bleed the youngsters, got to get them out there, blah, blah, blah. But, it's the same. It's the same for the World Cup cycle for 15, same for the Olympic cycle for the sevens. You got to start getting the young boys out there, getting them used to international competition of that caliber as well. Because some guys are going to retire and they are going to have to step aside, and you are going to have to get new names up. You also have to recognize that some guys, so we have Cole Davis, we have the aforementioned Quinn Nawadi, who are playing 15s now, and it looks like they'll be playing 15s for a significant portion of their career. So should you now transition to saying like we will have like exclusively sevens players in the Canada setup, maybe even have some guys in the Premiership sevens if that ever comes to fruition.
Yeah, so that's the thing that I wanted to bring up before we get Derek's thoughts about this, is that we had some of the players from Great Britain talk about how if you look at all the teams that were in the medal rounds, they all had full-time programs.
Yeah.
And that was his biggest frustrations. Look what we did without having a full-time program. And we know that Canada has a relatively full-time program, but the Premier Sevens circuit might make things more enticing for some guys to stick around, because that will be extra income being added to their pockets, and it'll just be a little bit on a different part of it. And I know this year it's weird with how they're starting in the fall, and the Premier Sevens is also going to be starting in the fall, so you'll have the world circuit and then this domestic circuit kind of interloping. But once things kind of post-COVID get back to normal, you shouldn't have that problem anymore. So the sevens life is a little bit clearer now if this Premier Sevens comes to fruition. Derek, what are your thoughts about where you want or where you think this program can go? Because again, like I said, a lot of their guys that they've relied on, Justin Douglas, Mike Fulafau, Nathan Hirayama, Harry Jones, and even kind of Connor Traynor coming back in the last year and a half. Adam Zaruba wasn't part of the program, part of the Olympics team, but he's 30 and he's been a part of their kind of setup for many years. They all seem to be getting ready to move on, or they're up there in terms of they're going to be 35, 34, 33 when the next Olympics come around. Like, are they going to want to stick around with the program?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess we'll see how long they can stick around. I mean, obviously, the next Olympics is only in 3 years instead of 4, right? So it's a little bit
That's right.
shorter.
Okay, so
Um, but I think, yeah, I think much like the 15s program, it's like you're gonna have to you have to at this point start bringing in some new guys. Maybe you see somebody, guys like Josiah Mora or Brock Webster, kind of getting a little bit more playing time. And I think at the sevens, that pro sevens circuit that looks to be being set up for the fall, it'd be interesting to see, like, when we get some full rosters or anything from that, how much that has an impact on that. I do kind of agree to the extent that I don't necessarily think you need to stop guys from going between the sevens and the 15s program, but I think you definitely need guys focusing on one or another for a good stretch of time. Like, if you do it for like an Olympic cycle and then decide you want to go play 15s after or something, then that's fine. I think, to your point where you're looking at the teams that got to the final four and stuff, it's like they don't, countries like, Fiji, Great Britain, New Zealand, they don't necessarily have guys jumping back and forth. And I think even like you saw like Semi Randrandra, who is, arguably the best center in the world, right? And it's like,
arguably one of the best 15s players in the world.
oh, yeah, exactly. Arguably one of the best players in the world, period. And he like barely crack Fiji's lineup for a lot of that tournament, right? And I don't even think he played in the gold medal game. And so I think that's kind of like that's where like the countries that are good at sevens, like that's what they do, right? Like they're able to focus on sevens. Obviously, like Ireland has a guy like Harry McNulty that was playing 15s like a couple weeks ago or whatever, or whenever the last time he actually played for the LA Giltinis was, at some point this year. But he's so. But again, you also look at Ireland not making the pool stage, right? So, or not making it out of the pool stage. So I think that's kind of where you would go. I think like overall, man, I think ultimate, like, I think Canada's sevens program overall is pretty good. It's just like you kind of said, you could look at this tournament, look at the teams that they lost to. It's Great Britain, Fiji in their pool. They got to the quarterfinals still, and then they ran into New Zealand. USA is still one of the best sevens teams. So you lost to them, and then you lost to Australia, right? Like, you lost to a lot of really good sevens programs like during
Yeah.
the Olympic
Yeah,
run,
it's just
right?
hard to
It's no
see. It's hard to see with all the playmaker, like the game changers that again, we can't speculate because we don't know what guys are planning. But if the guys we think are leaving the program are
you guys have
leaving,
both spent the entire like last 20 minutes speculating on guys
Yeah.
leaving.
I know.
Mm.
So, but my point is we with those guys leaving, I have a hard time seeing this. And again, we
But
haven't
again, you're
seen a
just
lot.
speculating on
No,
whether
no, sorry, no. You're. Let me finish. We haven't seen a lot. And then I think my big problem is we haven't seen any under 20. We haven't seen any of the young guys, and I think that's where some of my worry comes from. Is that
well, it's like we've seen them, like they've played at tournaments, right? Like guys like, like I said, like
yeah, but like
Mora
I'm
and
thinking, even
Webster have
thinking, when was
played
the last time we had a U20 tournament?
probably before COVID
Exactly. So we've had 2 years of
of
no
nobody
like
playing
no
anything.
young tours of sevens programs. We've had no U20 tournaments.
But that doesn't
So
mean their players are bad,
Derek,
right?
you need to listen to what I am saying, dude, because you keep on interrupting me. I'm saying it's concerning because it's just the unknown. I'm a fan that has seen some of the game changers from this program leaving, and I don't know what's coming. I've seen limited action of some guys again, like Josh Thiel and Josiah Mora and Brock
Just
Webster and the K's and Pat K and Isaac K. I've seen some of it in limited action, but again, you are taking guys like Connor Braid, Nathan Hirayama, and Justin Douglas, guys who have been starting they started every match for Canada, and saying, okay, you guys are and Harry Jones, you guys are probably gone because two of you guys are already realtors. One of you is 33 years old, and you're probably just absolutely tired of dragging Canada around. And Justin Douglas, he'll probably play for a couple more years. But like those guys are three out of the seven guys that are starting in your lineup, and they're gone. So I'm just concerned because I haven't seen anything from some of the younger guys.
well, I mean, like,
So And that's the thing with every kind of changeover in cycles, especially in rugby. The unknowns with the 15s program is I at least have MLR to watch some of these guys before we had a test match. You know what I'm saying? Like I at least could see a little bit of Siaki Vikilani, a little bit of Will Kelly, a little bit of Quinn Nawadi this year. I haven't seen anything from some of the young guys, and it's just concerning me as a fan. You can't take that away from me. You can't change my mind on that.
Well, I mean, then I think I'm
not saying that the Rugby Canada program is in dire straits. I'm not saying that. I never said that. I'm just saying that this is a transition period that we've never seen before because we haven't been able to see any of our young guys in 2 years.
Yeah, but it's like at the same time though, it's like I think there's been time like you're saying like you haven't seen some of these guys is like Josiah Mora made his debut in 2016, right? Like that's again, 5
Derek,
years ago.
You're choosing to ignore two things that I had said previously
it's
about the U20 tournament and about the 7 tours.
But it's also,
so you're choosing to ignore those things and then only talk about.
But it's also
couple
like
guys.
It's also tough to be like, hey, like we're worried about the future, but you like if you're worried about the future, but you can't name guys coming up though either.
That is
but is that a problem or is that just
because I'm not a member of Rugby Canada, so I don't need to know every single guy that's coming up. I'm a fan.
As like a fan, you're saying it's like nobody's coming up, but you don't. I
didn't say that. I said I don't know anyone who's coming up. I'm saying that we are trying to replace guys that have been legends in the 7th circuit for Canada. So you got to see that there's a pedestal that these guys are going to have to fill. These boots that they're filling are huge. Like how could you not look at Nathan Hirayama leaving and going, that is going to be a huge boots to fill, and I don't know how Canada is going to be able to fill those boots.
No, obviously Hirayama is like he's third all time in scoring. That's obviously going to be big to fill. Brock Webster looks pretty good though. Like if he chooses to keep on that 7s path, right? So, I mean, there's guys there. Jake Thiel got into the Australian game at the end of this tournament and stuff, right? So it's like there's definitely guys there. I think I think Canada is going to get better at 7s. I do think they need guys focusing on it more though. Right. And it's like, if you're going to play 7, because I think even that, let's like, I think Hirayama got better once he became a 7s player.
Yeah. Once he
started like,
fly half at the 2015 World Cup.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's like once
same thing with Harry Jones.
Once he kind of stopped bouncing between the two, he got way better at 7s.
Yeah.
And he's one of the best players on the tour, right? Regardless of any country, right? He's just flat out one of the best guys on the tour. So I think you kind of do need that focus. And I think, like I said, 7s can become an opportunity. I don't think it necessarily has to be a stopping or like, a point to like elevate guys. But I do think that the best countries have guys focusing on playing 7s. And I think that's kind of where you need to go. But I'm not worried about guys leaving, especially since we don't actually know who's leaving. So I'm not going to worry about it too much.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you will worry about it on your own time then. All right. Well, let's move on then, guys. So the women start in like 45 minutes. Their first game is up against Brazil. For those who are wondering, we are recording on, it's Wednesday night. So Canada will be facing Brazil very soon, and then they will play Fiji, and then they will play France. Expectation is they will be top of their group or in the top 2, so they'll be moving on. So it's going to be a very interesting situation for them.
They should definitely be at the top of their group.
Yeah, I mean,
Fiji 2 is under expectations.
Yeah, I know. Again, are we gonna count out Fiji though? Like that's
yes. Canada should.
Fiji women and Fiji men are not the same.
Yeah, no, yeah. This is Canada. This team should have gold medal expectations. The first step to winning a gold medal is running through your group. They should finish first, and they should finish first by a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and you know what? Now that I'm looking at it, Fiji's in 2019 they were 10th.
Yeah. No. Yeah. They should run through this group.
Really, France is higher than them in the pool. So that. Yeah. Anyways,
yeah, they should still destroyed.
Guys, we've talked about the women's program multiple times on the show. Gold or bust is how they feel, and I think you got to look at how the U.S. kind of did in the men's side, and kind of look like that is basically what they want to avoid. The U.S. were going for medals. They've had one of the most consistent programs since Rio, and it was a pretty disappointing finish in their eyes. I mean, they're all pioneers of the game, so we want to give them pat on the back for what they've done for the sport. But I think when we look at the women's program for Canada, I think that is kind of their worst case scenario is what happened to the US this year.
Yeah, you mean losing? Yeah. Losing is the worst case scenario. It's like we said, man.
For the women, like different expectation for the men.
No, yeah. Definitely. Like this team should be like this is a team that should, if they don't medal, like if they don't medal, it's disappointing.
Yeah.
Like, we'll see. Like you said, it's like by the time we're recording, they're going to play Brazil in about 45 or just over an hour, I guess, by now. So they're going to play Brazil, and then they get Fiji, I guess, in the morning, and then they get France tomorrow. But yeah, they should, like, they got Landry, who's arguably one of maybe the best women's sevens player ever, certainly the best to ever wear a Canada jersey, and they have like the other stars like Williams and Bianca Farrell, and to back them up, to back her up too, right? So it's the team's stacked. The team's stacked, and they have a good group, so I think they should fly through that, and then we'll see who they end up having to play once they get through to the quarterfinals. But it's something to like that's to me, that's it. That's the expectations. Like they have to medal, like ideally a gold one, but I think ideally a gold one, and especially since the fact that they're coming off of a bronze medal too, like at the previous Olympics, it's like you either have to match that or improve upon it, right? So it is like you said, it's a little bit different than the men's tournament, right? So
just a couple stats for you guys. Ghislaine Landry is third all time with tries, 143. She is number one all time for points scored with 1,356, and then she's second all time with conversions with 319. No slouch yourself, Bianca Farella is second all time in try scored, fifth all time in points scored. So we've kind of got two legends of the game absolutely going at it for Canada. So I'm excited. I know that you guys are too. So let's move on, because we have other amazing rugby to talk about, which is exciting. This weekend saw two semifinal matches. Both had kind of different feels to it, which I think is always interesting. And the first one was ATL just squeaking by Rugby United New York 10-9. Stu, I want to get your thoughts on this game, because it was an interesting, hard fought match for sure.
Yeah. So I'm going to say something in a bit, but obviously, congratulations to Rugby ATL. There was a moment where I'm sure a few people were like, biting fingernails all the way down to the knuckle. Because it's one of these games, it's similar to ATL's game against Nola Gold earlier in the season. It's a low-scoring game, but it's still incredibly tense. And I think that tension really added to it. And I mean, when you say like, oh, Dan Hollinshead, he's had to return to New Zealand because he has his like MITA 10 or whatever competition it is, he has that contract he has to honor. So Harry Bennett has to step up instead. And, especially like his second kick, which was after he'd been clattered from a clearing kick, was over, I'm pretty sure it was like closer to 60 meters than 50 meters. And he nails that. And suddenly, if you're an ATL fan, you may be going like, oh, can't really do those kind of, give away those kind of penalties anymore. And then at the start of the second half, where there was just that a good 5 to 10 minutes of line out, driving maul, it's a penalty, repeat process until yellow card appears. And even with the advantage, it's then Chance Wengalewski stamps on a player's head, and then he's sent to the sin bin, and it's all turned around. And yet, here's the thing: at no point watching that game did I think ATL weren't going to win it. They just seemed to have some form of composure. And that's what, that they're just, as in like, yeah, we may have conceded 2 extra penalties, so now we're 6 points down, but we're still going to win this game. Like,
well, I want to go back to the Fire and Ice Cup with Toronto Arrows. So, if you guys remember and listeners remember, that game was first half. It was rugby ATL stopping everything the Arrows could do. They had a quick defensive line that stopped everything, and it just seemed that anytime the Arrows got a chance to do something, there was a guy in the ribs tackling them. Then they come out of the shed the second half and they start kicking the ball more. They started, trying to get the ball out wide more, and using those different types of skills to get the ball out wide, and they almost won the game off of it. I did not see any type of strategy change like that from Rugby United New York. Like, they seemed convinced that they were going to win this the way they wanted to. And, you got guys like Quinn Nawadi on the wing, kind of just starved for the ball and never really got to do a whole lot with it. And I think, and again, I don't watch every single Rooney game, so, I hope someone can correct me on this, but I have loved watching Quinn Nawadi's defense develop over this year. I just wish that they used him more as a weapon,
Oh,
yeah.
I think
ahead,
in the case of this game, the biggest problem is that they never had the ball. Like, if you want to talk with like Quinn Nawadi being starved of possession or starved of time with the ball on the wing, it was like the possession numbers in this game was 61-39 in favor of Atlanta. Like New York barely touched the ball. And even like you can kind of look at the plays, like the penalties that they got, like were earned, but like the second Bennett penalty was because Rowan Gauss hit Bennett after he kicked. And on that play, the penalty goes to where the ball lands. Right. So it's like Rooney, like that was a penalty that happened like deep inside Rooney's 22, but because it was on a kick, it goes to where the ball lands, happened to be within Bennett's range where the ball landed. Right. So it was like they weren't really getting that possession.
No, I mean, you're right. 37, Rooney had 3%.
Oh, I know. I'm
37%. Right. I know, but I'm kind of saying to the listeners, Derek, they had, 300 less meters carried. They had to make almost double the amount of tackles. It just, I think Stu kind of hit the nail on the head. I don't think there's ever a period in this game where I thought Rooney might make a win out of this.
The saving grace, I think, is like Rooney tackled pretty well throughout the game. Like, they played pretty well on defense. Guys like Breakley, Tawaki, Minturn were outstanding in defense, I thought, throughout this game. Tawaki had some real nice plays where he just like messed up Rugby ATL's maul. Most notably the one at the end of the game where he just like, it looked like he just was like, it kind of looked like Rugby ATL didn't even have players in the maul. He just went right through and grabbed the ball carrier and just threw him out of into touch by his jersey to end the half. Right. So I thought like Rooney did well in that. The problem is just, it's one of those things where it's like when you have the ball as much as Rugby ATL did, eventually the other team's going to start taking penalties. And Rooney's biggest problem is it's like, right, that whole thing where it's like fool me once, shame on you, but it's like fool me like 15 times in a row in a 10-minute span of like just penalty, yellow card, penalty. Like, it's like the amount of penalties that they gave up in a row. And it's just so like Rugby ATL's lineout was 100%, where Rooney had success was kind of, as I said, Tawaki, Breakley destroying their maul. But it was like you give that team like whatever it was, like what would it have been, like 5, 6, 7 shots in a row at it? Like they're gonna score eventually. And eventually they did kind of, and eventually they did figure it out, man. So, it's it was interesting because it's like, Rugby ATL is usually one of those teams that it's like they don't necessarily have possession all that often just because of the way they play. But just the way that this game ended up kind of working out, it was they had the possession of the ball all the time, and it was just constant penalties from Rooney that I think, going into next week, I think there is a slight area of concern of being like, like Rugby ATL probably should have had a lot more points than what they ended up with in this game, right? And just based on like the amount of opportunities, and they just kept, it's I think what this game kind of comes down to is like, if you're gonna give it like Rooney conceded 18 penalties in this game. So I mean, if you're gonna give a team 18, and a lot of those penalties were like, while they were trying to defend their goal line, which I thought they actually did a really good job of, especially like, and in all honesty, too, that one stretch, I think it's from like the 43rd minute to about the 50th minute, where it's like Rugby ATL's within 10 meters of their line for like a solid like 7-8 minute stretch. And Rooney's just taking penalty after penalty. Eventually there's one yellow card. They're still taking penalties. And then Rugby ATL still can't score though. And then eventually when Gluski gets that yellow card after the TMO review, and Rooney comes out, and I was kind of looking at that moment of the game, kind of being like, if you're Rooney, based on the way this game was going at the time, it was like you probably take that trade of like just take constant penalties to stop them from scoring, and after 7 minutes you finally get to clear the ball, and it's 14 on 14 or whatever. Like I thought like that was a pretty decent ish trade at the time. It's like I think you can sacrifice some penalties to save a try, but I mean, it was just the amount of penalties that they took eventually just straight up caught up to them,
For
and
sure.
that's why they ended up losing the game.
Okay, guys. Well, what do we think about the other game that kind of happened? A real kind of seesaw affair. I really thought up until until Ryan James entered the pitch that Utah had this game, but LA pulls out the win, 17-13. I want to go back to the first couple episodes before this season started, where a scrappy Brit Stu Hardy said that his MVP was going to be Ryan James. And you know what, buddy? I thought he was fine, but you know what? After this semifinal performance, I might have to give you a little bit more credit than we originally gave you, because that was quite the performance by James, and hopefully it's enough to earn him a starting spot, because that was a great game.
All I can say is I'm glad everyone is finally coming around to what I saw right at the start. And no, in all honesty, I thought Adam Ashley Cooper running back inside, eliminating 3 defenders was genius, which you obviously get when you're a multi-World Cup player. I thought Harrison Goddard as well, because he spotted James being available on the wing, which allowed the first try. And then obviously James's sidestep, which got the match-winning score. It was just fantastic. But there were, it was just like everything in between those moments was maybe not as polished as LA was hoping it would be. Mm-hmm. Also got to give credit to Sama Malolo for, adding another try to his season record. I thought that was great work from him. And I think the issue I had for LA was after Gitter went off and
Luke Carty.
Yeah, Carty came on. The kicking accuracy was poor. I don't think he got a single kick. And, if there's one team you don't want to have within scoring range, it's Utah because 4 times a season they've been able to have a last-minute score. Obviously, a handling error prevented that from happening
handling
again.
error. That was Vularaka probably breaking a handful of ribs and causing a knock on. That hit was unreal. That was I think that was one of the best hits of the season. And you can kind of see like Vuga Kato kind of down while the play was kind of finishing up. It took him a while to get up from that. That hit was amazing.
Yeah, well, perfectly timed to essentially force a knock on. But but I mean, for like the first 30, 35 minutes, it was, equally intense, both sides, wanting to attack, but their defenses were just too great for either side to overcome. It was also good to see. I know that LA have been selling tickets for that game for $10. They're now selling the championship final tickets for between $10 and $5 as well. So I think they're hoping to break the MLR attendance record, which if any stadium can do it, it's the one with 77,000.
Did we have like a
capacity.
number of there's like how many fans were there?
For that game, I don't think so. I've looked on Reddit and people have said that it was more or less, and they said there's less sitting down, but more in like the beer garden area.
Like a beer garden thing or something.
Yeah, it's annoying that they haven't released like official because they did it for SoFi, and I'm like, well, can you do it again, please? But I'm sure we'll find out within the coming weeks and so. But that said, I thought it was it was a more entertaining game for a neutral fan, especially because there were simply 4 times as many tries.
Also, nice. The lack of humidity and the ball being like a bar of soap.
The need of the Japan balls, the balls they'll never like. I remember World Rugby posting a photo about it. And it's like them specifically saying like, we will never use these balls in any other tournament because of how sticky they are, like how like grippy they are. Like my wife was basically like, so it's like a Spider-Man ball. Like I'm like, kind of, yeah. Like that's what Rugby ATL and Rooney needed.
Yeah, apparently the Rhino balls kind of turn into bars of soap once they get wet and a little bit of humidity. And like in the humidity when you have sweat on them and stuff, it doesn't help. I thought this game I thought was very entertaining. It was interesting to see. I thought 2 of the best offensive teams in the league being forced to play a lot of defense. So that was a lot of fun. And it's nice to see that they have it in them to do that too. The lineouts I thought were very interesting in this game, and it's not so much because so LA was 63% and Utah was 71%. And it's not even so much that I thought that the lineouts were bad, but it was just like, I think the lineout defense was so good that it screwed up the lineouts for both teams. And I think it's one of those interesting things where it's like, I think LA and Utah are both very good at defending lineouts, and they went up against each other today, and their defensive lineouts is better than their offensive execution of those lineouts. And it just, kind of created a massive problems for everybody. Billy Meeks in defense was absolutely unreal too. He had 3 breakdown steals. As like, that one, I guess that one game where he had to play flanker and then was like unreal. And it's like, the more that I think back to that is like, oh man, like LA really does just have a flanker that can run and pass the ball really well in their midfield there. So, he is incredible defensively. He had an outstanding game. But like DTH, to get into a little of the Canadian content too, I thought DTH played really well in this game too. He kind of had a couple big runs, went around looking for work a lot, and it was interesting. I thought there's a couple other like interesting things about like just through this game that I thought too. It's interesting seeing tries being disallowed by TMOs that would have counted if it was earlier in the season or something like that. So that's always interesting.
Seeing TMO at Lupo Field, I'm going, okay, we got to make this a regular thing. And I know Derek, you've talked about like money and like it being a money thing, but like
No, I think
fans have made a point after seeing the TMO in the semifinals this year that this has to be a priority, if not next year, the year after. Like, come on, MLR. It is changing outcomes of games in the regular season.
you're changing outcomes of games in the playoffs too, right now. So it's
Yeah,
I
but
think
for the most part, they're getting the right call.
no,
if
yeah,
going to
they
TMO.
are getting the right call. I just think when it comes to TMO, in my opinion, I think one, I agree with you, Dan, that like TMO for every game, that would be nice. Hopefully that's something that can happen in the near future. But I think in my opinion, from the first preseason game to the final whistle of the championship should be played under the same rules. That's just
So
my
you think
opinion on
you
it.
think that there shouldn't be TMO?
Yeah,
this
I
year?
think if you play without TMO in the regular, yeah, I think if you play
Okay,
without
yeah, I can get behind that.
yeah,
I can get behind
that's
that.
the only reason I'm saying I don't. And it's like, because like in all honesty, you're saying it changes outcomes of games in the regular season, and it's like, well, yeah, like it changed outcomes of the games in the playoffs. Because if it was the regular season, Ryberg's try 7 minutes in counts,
That's
right?
fair.
So like
Fair
it is a
point.
little bit different. When Gluski might not have gotten a yellow card, right? So it's like it changes outcomes a lot, right? It's still changing outcomes, and I think even like I go back to that one game that was at SoFi Stadium where Derek Summers reversed a call because he saw it on one of the
the
screens.
jumbo screen. He's like, I can't ignore that.
Yeah,
I know we don't have TMO,
like,
but it's right there.
And you know, I don't fault Derek Summers for that because at the end of the day, that call, his original call was wrong, and like the screen was showing that. But it's like, but I'm like, yeah, not every stadium has that though, right? So it's like you shouldn't. Like I just, it's like, should you be allowed to reverse a call because you see it on a screen? I don't know.
You don't need this. Like,
but
the TMO,
yeah,
we talked about this. TMO doesn't need the big screen.
No, they don't need the big.
They
Atlanta
made it work
showed
at loop. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So,
Atlanta showed that. I think even JP Doyle mentioned it during the thing. It's like, yeah, we don't need to put it up. Someone's looking at it.
Yeah.
During one of the games too. That's a side tangent though, but I think that's interesting. The one thing I do think needs to change, definitely needs to change. You know, go back to my one pet peeve of the league, which is the injury reports. You know, going into this game, into both the games, and you're seeing like Dom, Carl Say, Williams, you know, key guys missing from the lineups with little to no explanation. Brian Ray, I think, eventually confirmed that Dom is injured, but you know, Carl Say, nothing. Why wasn't Van Voot playing? Why wasn't Lance Williams playing? I think, and the thing that I get with the injury reports the most is just that like there's teams in the league that do it. Like the Arrows do it. LA kind of does it. They kind of mix it into like some of their pre-match like previews and stuff. They kind of mix it in. They don't really have an official one, but they at least kind of put something out. But I think that's one of those things that the league definitely needs to improve upon for next year. Because I think like as this league grows, like that's going to become something that just can't continue to happen, I don't think. And you know, you look at how MLR has partnered with a handful of like gambling related companies. And you know, one of the big things with gambling and stuff, you look at like the NFL, which is one of the like the biggest leagues for gambling and stuff. They have like a full page on their website dedicated to injury reports, right? TSN has a whole page dedicated simply to NHL.
Yeah, and it's funny. Will Kelly kind of just asked Brian Way, "It's like, why do you need to know?" Like,
because
and then he also kind of said that like injury reports isn't always truthful. Keep that in mind. But if we want to grow the league, and again, like you said, we want to do fantasy stuff. And if we want to have guys like you and Brian write reports and talk about, if we want to have more people writing about rugby, like we need to know these things.
In all honesty, with
Yeah.
saying if it's truthful or not. In all honesty, I don't care if it's truthful or not. Tell me the guy's out. Tell me how long he's out for. Right? Like that's all. You know what I mean? Like you're kind of looking at, like I'm looking at the Utah Warriors right now. And it's like, okay, so why isn't Lance Williams playing? Why isn't one of your best players playing in a playoff game? It's either like what are you left with? He's either hurt or the coach has lost his mind. Like I don't know where to go, right? Like,
and I think part of one of those things too is that like with the semi-professional nature of the sport or of MLR, I wonder if it's like oh, we don't want to have to say that like, oh, Lance can't come because he's got a he can't get hurt because he's got to work this, week. I know he's a school teacher, so might not.
Then say he's hurt. Then say like you.
Yeah, exactly. That's where the truthfulness comes into play. You say
like,
upper body injury. He can't play this weekend.
If he's not actually hurt, just call it he's out for personal reasons.
Yeah.
Just say an
come on, guys.
explanation.
It's not that hard.
Just say he's unavailable if you want to just
unavailable for selection.
Yeah,
exactly.
Anyways,
exactly.
All right, guys.
Right. But this is what they do in like European leagues. They will say these players are out for injury, these players are out for international duty.
Yeah,
because I mean, like we were going through like
we
the
can
hours
figure
list,
out
and we forgot about the Uruguayan players.
It's easy to figure out international duty because they show up in a game for a country. So
but
that's the thing. Not every fan is as tuned in as we are.
Yeah, but that's
what I mean.
But, if we're starting to try to pull in new fans, I see.
Yeah, but okay, so new fans though, that's where I think this is important. Is like,
he's agreeing.
I think in growing the game, something that needs to happen is like I think encouraging gambling and to an extra extent fantasy is a good way to grow the game, right? Fantasy sports in North America is huge across all the major leagues. And I think like I'm looking back at this season and be like, in the current state of the league, you can't do fantasy for Major League Rugby.
No,
it wouldn't work at all, right? Because it's like, stats, which obviously is a big financial endeavor, so I understand why that's not there. But it's like the injury reports
partnered with
picture, they picture with
stats companies, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's definitely stuff they're building towards. I'm not saying they're not building towards it, but I think like I mean, like there's even some things like say we had a fantasy league this year, Dan, and you drafted Jeff Hassler. Right, to like be like how well, and you're sitting there in week 4 being like, well, how long is this guy out for? I need to win.
At least with like football, they provide injury updates.
Yeah, exactly. That's why
we had to find out from a guy from a podcaster.
Yeah, but that's why they do it though, right? Is because it encourages that extra level of fan engagement. For sure. So, but even at that, it also just like gets rid of questions like why didn't Lance Williams play? Why didn't Jason Dawn play? Why didn't Adrian Carlsay play? Right? It's just the questions that you're out there to ask, right? And I just think like I know it's a bit of a pet peeve. I know I rant about it.
No, it's fine because I agree with you.
But I think it is something that needs to improve going forward. Be interesting to see, especially from Atlanta's point of view, if Dom, Carlsay, Van Voot, those guys are back in the lineup for the final.
For sure.
If not. And like if they're not, then for 2 weeks in a row, I'm like, okay, so you have like one of the best big men in the league, and you're just not playing them.
The difference that Kurt Coleman being in and Escura was a big difference for me. I forgot to mention that.
But even that, like Kurt Coleman was another guy that got hurt, but the difference was like we saw him get hurt. So everybody, like we were all kind of like, yeah, Coleman's not playing because he's hurt. Like here's the footage of him getting hurt, right? But even at that, it's like you should have to follow something like that up, being like, yeah, he's out for 2 to 3 months or whatever he ended up being out for.
All right,
and that's the end of
that's the end of your rant, and we gotta finish up this episode, guys, because we are getting close.
Episode.
I know, that's fine. All right, guys, we have one more Major League Rugby match. This is it. So we are going to make our final predictions for this season on who will be lifting the shield.
Mm-hmm.
And judging by the fact that my name is first, I am going to go first. I am going to say that LA wins.
Ooh. Are you going to offer any explanation or anything with that?
Yeah. I think that they have now played, they played Rugby ATL. They know about I think when you've got decision makers like Gitau, Adam Ashley Cooper, Billy Meeks, Poitevin, like they've got guys who have experience. And when I think that they now knowing and now having much more tape of Rugby ATL to look at, I think that they are going to be able to manipulate that line speed, kind of like how I mentioned how the Arrows did in the second half of that Fire and Ice Cup. Mm-hmm. And you give guys like DTH, Ryan James, Ryberg a chance to kind of break through that.
Mm-hmm.
They need to fix up their lineout. Their lineout was kind of a mess the last couple weeks. I mean, I know the first Utah game was kind of their B plus squad or their A squad, so it wasn't the full Guilties lineup, but both games that kind of looked messy. So if they could kind of solidify that as a set piece that they've used all year, I like their chances. So I'm going to go with LA. Derek.
Oh, this game's gonna be fun. I'm really looking forward to it. Awesome that it's in LA. A little bit of grass, hopefully a bit of sun. Get some great weather for the match. Um, I think this game's going to be really close. Obviously, Dan, I think we talked about last week how the previous meeting between these two is probably our favorite game of the year. Just with the way Rugby ATL played defense in that game was phenomenal. Obviously, if they can do that again, life will be. They could probably make life miserable. I think they're getting Angus Cottrell back. I think his suspension's up. So LA, that'll be pretty good. The interesting thing that you did kind of mention is right then you said that like LA's lineout has been or so lately. Okay, you're nodding. All right, people can't see nods on audio, Dan, but okay.
If they're watching,
if they're watching it, they got the nod, but people can't see nods, or people can't hear nods, I guess. But it's like kind of looking at it though, it's like like their lineout. Their lineout is really good. It's one of the better lineouts in the league. But it hasn't necessarily been clicking. And Johan Momsen and Connor Cook are two of the best guys in the league at messing up your lineout. Right. So it's like I think that's going to be an interesting matchup. Obviously I think the big one with this is that LA, I think, is the best offensive team in the league, and then Rugby ATL is the best defensive team in the league. So that's always an interesting dynamic to go up against. However, Rugby ATL's offense isn't as good as LA's defense, right? So it's like you do kind of have that mix. It's just, to me, and then set piece, I think LA, like I just kind of said, I think Rugby ATL has a little bit of an advantage, and in the line out, I think they have an advantage. In the scrum, I think they still have a slight advantage in that as well. Chance Wingluski versus Charlie Abel, matchup that I really like in favor of Atlanta's side. And I just in general like, the way Rugby ATL plays, and they beat LA before, so they figured out the book on them. It's the big question for me though is also like who is going to actually play for Rugby ATL, right? Well, they got the they like we said, this, like, they have a lot of guys that were missing without explanation last week. So who actually returns? Do any of those guys return? Because if they're all back, it's a little bit different. I think like full powered Rugby ATL I think can win this game. If they're missing some guys though, I'm not, then I think it becomes a little bit harder. So I've said the same thing in like the whole year though. It's like offense sells tickets, defense wins championships. So I'm going to go with Rugby ATL.
ATL. And I think Derek already like mentioned all the intricate details of why ATL would win, but obviously LA aren't one to let previous encounters foretell what will happen in the next round, as shown with Utah. But I think ATL will come in. They'll force errors on LA, and even if it just means that it's similar to the game against New York, where they're just like death by penalties, then maybe that's what they have to do. But
I hope my gaggle of Australian lads prove both of you wrong. And you know what, guys? I think that's probably where we'll end it tonight. Stu's camera has decided that as well. So, folks, we've got
Stu's gone, I guess.
We are finishing up our sevens with the women's this week. We've got the MLR final running into the next couple of weeks. We'll be rugby-less, so tune in to see what we've got in store. If you want to listen to more of our podcast episodes, we've done a couple of great interviews. We've been kind of outlining how things have gone for MLR, the Arrows, Rugby Canada, all of it. We've kind of covered it all on this show. So please feel free to look back at some of our episodes. Find us at Rouge Rugby on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We are on YouTube, where all of our episodes are posted, on all of your podcasting platforms. Gentlemen, let's pitter patter and get at it, because we have a rugby match to watch.